The night was quiet on the edge of the small human farm. A silver moon hung above the wheat fields, and only the sound of insects filled the air. Jacob Turner, a lonely farmer, sat on his porch with his old lantern beside him. It had been another long day of work, and he was ready to rest. But then he heard it. A faint rustle came from the apple trees near the barn. At first, Jacob thought it was just the wind. Then he heard something else, soft footsteps, careful, sneaky. His tired eyes narrowed. Another thief, he muttered under his breath. The last few weeks, some of his apples had gone missing, and he had blamed the local kids. But tonight, he decided to find out for sure. He grabbed his lantern and shotgun, walking slowly toward the orchard. The ground was cold and damp, and the air smelled like rain. The moonlight fell through the trees, and every shadow looked alive. As he reached the middle of the orchard, he saw movement near one of the lower branches. Someone small was hiding under the leaves. Jacob lifted his lantern high, and what he saw made him freeze. It wasn't a kid. It wasn't even human. A tiny creature, barely the height of his knee, stood trembling beside the fallen apples. Her skin had a faint silver tone that shimmered under the moon. Her eyes were large and bright blue, filled with fear and hunger. In her little hands, she held a half-eaten apple, her lips shaking as if she was about to cry. For a moment, neither of them moved. The lantern light flickered between them, painting the orchard in soft gold. Jacob's heart pounded. He had heard rumors of aliens hiding in the mountains after the wars, but he never believed them. And now one was standing right here in his field, stealing from him. Who? Who are you? Jacob asked in a low voice. The little alien girl didn't answer. She took a small step back, eyes wide, ready to run. Jacob noticed her feet, bare, covered in cuts and dirt. Her clothes were torn like she had been running for days. She looked half-starved. Stop, Jacob said, but not in anger. His voice was softer now. He lowered the gun slowly. I'm not going to hurt you, she hesitated. Her breathing was fast and shaky. Then, in a voice that sounded like a whisper, she said, I didn't mean to steal. I just needed food. For my brother. The words hit him hard. Her brother? There was another one? Jacob felt a strange twist inside his chest. He looked at the bitten apple in her hand and realized how desperate she must have been to risk coming here. Where's your brother? He asked. She looked toward the dark forest. He's hiding. He's sick. He hasn't eaten for 2 days. Jacob's throat tightened. He looked at her again, so small, shaking from cold, trying to stay brave. The world had been harsh since the alien wars ended. Humans didn't trust aliens. Aliens feared humans. But right now, all Jacob saw was a starving child. He took a deep breath and knelt down, trying not to scare her. Listen, little one. You can have the apple. Take more if you need, but you can't stay out there all night. It's too cold. She looked confused. You're not angry? He smiled a little, though his eyes were tired. I've got plenty of apples, but I don't have plenty of little girls running around my farm at midnight. Come on, before the rain starts. For a moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she walked closer. The lantern light showed tears on her cheeks. When she reached him, Jacob saw how fragile she was. Thin arms, dirty face, tiny fingers holding the fruit like treasure. He led her to his old wooden shed near the barn. It wasn't much, but it was warm inside. He gave her a blanket and a piece of bread. She ate quietly, never taking her eyes off him, still unsure if she should trust this tall human with rough hands and a tired face. When she finally finished eating, she whispered, My name is Lyra. Jacob nodded. All right, Lyra, my name's Jacob. You can rest here tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk about finding your brother. Her eyes widened. You'd help me? Jacob looked at the lantern's flame, flickering in the dark shed. Maybe, he said softly. But first you need to sleep. Outside, the rain began to fall. Inside, the alien girl wrapped herself in the blanket and closed her eyes. Jacob stood at the door for a long time, watching the rain hit the fields. He didn't know why he had helped her. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was something deeper. But as he walked back to his house, one thought echoed in his mind. What kind of world makes a child steal apples just to stay alive? And he knew deep down that his quiet farm life would never be the same again. Rain poured heavily through the night, turning the earth soft and the air cold. The sound of thunder rolled across the valley, echoing through the old barn walls. Inside the small wooden shed, Jacob sat on a broken stool, staring at the strange little creature now sleeping under his blanket. Her breathing was slow, peaceful, like she finally felt safe for the first time in a long while. He still couldn't believe it. An alien child here on his farm, half-starved and hiding from the world. He rubbed his tired face and sighed. "What did you get yourself into, Jacob?" he muttered. When morning came, gray light filled the shed. Jacob opened the door quietly and cold mist drifted in. The girl stirred. She blinked her large blue eyes, confused for a moment before remembering where she was. She sat up fast, clutching the blanket. "It's all right," Jacob said softly. "You're safe here." She looked around, her gaze full of fear. "They will come for me," she whispered. "The patrols." "Who?" Jacob frowned. "Who's looking for you?" "The collectors," she said, trembling. "They take my kind away. My brother was taken when they found us last time." I ran. Jacob's stomach sank. The collectors, he'd heard rumors. Alien patrols who cleaned up the planets after the wars, rounding up survivors and selling them into labor camps. He had always thought it was just talk, but the terror in her eyes told him it was real. He handed her a cup of warm milk and half a loaf of bread. "Eat," he said. "You need your strength." She took the cup with both hands. Her fingers were small and cold, her skin faintly glowing where the light hit it. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Jacob looked away. "Because you needed help." That simple answer seemed to confuse her. She watched him silently, as if trying to understand this strange human kindness. After breakfast, Jacob went outside to check the fences, but when he reached the orchard, his heart froze. The mud was covered in footprints. Not his, not hers. Heavy boots. Fresh. They led straight to the back of the property. He followed them quietly, keeping low behind the apple trees. At the far edge of his land, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Marks from a hovercraft. Someone had been here last night. Maybe watching, maybe searching. He rushed back to the shed. Lyra was still sitting near the small fire he had lit for her, holding the blanket tight. Her eyes widened when she saw his face. "What is it?" she asked. "Someone was here," Jacob said quickly. "They might come back." Lyra stood up, panic spreading across her face. "We have to go. If they find me, they'll take me too. Please don't tell them I was here." Jacob could hear the fear in her voice. It wasn't just worry, it was pure deep terror. The kind that only comes from seeing too much pain. He knelt beside her. "You said your brother's still alive?" She nodded weakly. "He's in a camp north of here. I can feel him." "Feel him?" Jacob frowned. Lyra touched her chest lightly. "My kind, we can sense each other. Our hearts are connected. His heartbeat is weak, but I can still feel it." Jacob stared at her, unsure if he should believe it, but somehow he did. He saw the truth in her eyes. He stood up, his decision already forming. "Then we're going to get him out." Lyra blinked, shocked. "What? No, you can't." "They'll kill you if you try." "I've got no family," Jacob said quietly. "And I'm tired of watching people suffer while I do nothing." She shook her head, tears forming. "You don't even know me." Jacob gave a faint smile. "I didn't know the man who once pulled me out of a flood when I was 10. But he did it anyway. Sometimes that's enough." Outside, thunder rumbled again, distant this time. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with tension. Lyra stepped closer, still scared but trying to be brave. "If you really mean to help, we must leave before sunset. The patrols search at night." Jacob looked around his old shed, the cracked walls, the tools, the quiet emptiness. This place had been his whole world for years. But now, standing beside this tiny alien girl with eyes full of hope and fear, he realized something. The farm wasn't life. Helping her was. He started gathering supplies, some food, a few old maps, his coat, and a small plasma torch he used for repairs. Lyra helped as best she could, her hands trembling but determined. When they stepped out into the misty morning, Jacob glanced at the horizon. The clouds were breaking and a weak sun shone through. He looked down at Lyra, who was staring up at the light as if seeing it for the first time. "Stick close," he said quietly. "We've got a long road ahead." Lyra nodded. "You don't understand what they'll do if they find us." Jacob adjusted his coat and gave her a small, tired smile. "I've been hunted by debt collectors before. How bad can space ones be?" For the first time she laughed, a small, soft sound that warmed the cold morning. It was the first sound of life on that farm in years. But far away in the shadow of the hills, a patrol drone blinked red and flew toward the valley. The hunt had already begun, and Jacob Turner, the quiet farmer, had no idea that by protecting one frightened alien child, He had just declared war on half the galaxy. The morning after the storm felt too still, too quiet. The air smelled like wet earth and metal, and the clouds hung low over Jacob's farm. He was feeding his old horse when the hum began, a deep vibration in the sky that made the animals restless. The sound wasn't thunder. It was a machine. Jacob stepped outside, squinting at the horizon. A faint blue light flashed between the trees. His heart sank. "They found us," he whispered. Inside the shed, Lyra jumped to her feet. She felt it too, the same cold pulse that haunted her dreams. The collectors were near. Jacob grabbed his jacket and ran back inside. "Stay quiet," he said. "Don't move unless I tell you." The hum grew louder. Dust rose from the ground as a sleek hovercraft descended near the gate. 3 armored patrolmen stepped out. Their skin was pale gray. Their helmets glowed with scanning lights. The leader, taller than the rest, had sharp violet eyes. He looked around with practiced calm, the kind that came from hunting beings who couldn't fight back. Jacob's palms were sweating. He wiped them on his pants and walked to the gate, pretending to be annoyed but calm. "Hey, can I help you folks?" he said, forcing a smile. The alien officer looked him over. "Human resident Jacob Turner," he said, reading from a wrist scanner. "We're conducting a search. A fugitive of non-human origin was tracked to this sector last night." Jacob pretended to look confused. "Fugitive here? You must be mistaken. Only thing running around here are rabbits." The officer's gaze hardened. "We have thermal readings showing movement near your orchard." Jacob shrugged. "Yeah, that'd be me checking the fences after the storm. You can see half my orchard's a mess. I got nothing to hide." Behind the shed door, Lyra held her breath. The sound of their voices made her hands tremble. Through a crack in the wood, she saw the soldiers, tall, armed, and merciless. Her pulse raced as memories flashed in her mind, screams, cages, cold light. The collector's ships had taken everything from her. She could almost hear her brother's voice calling her name. Jacob stood steady as one of the patrolmen moved toward the shed. "Wait," Jacob said quickly. "That old thing's about to fall apart. You open it, it might collapse on you." The patrolman ignored him and pulled at the latch. The door creaked open slightly, enough for light to slip in. Lyra crouched lower, holding her breath so long her chest hurt. Then a loud bang echoed. Jacob had kicked over a metal bucket near the barn. "Damn it!" he shouted. "You see? That's why I said not to touch anything." The officer turned sharply toward him. "You seem nervous, human." Jacob laughed, though his throat was dry. "You ever had your whole year's crop drowned in rainwater?" "Yeah, I'm nervous. I don't need soldiers breaking more of my stuff." The officer's eyes scanned him for several seconds, reading every flicker of emotion. Then he turned away. "Very well," he said coldly. "If you see or hear anything unusual, report immediately. Harboring non-humans is a crime." "I'll be sure to do that," Jacob said with a nod. The soldiers stepped back into their craft. The engines roared, kicking up wind and dust. Lyra covered her face as the noise filled the shed. Then, as quickly as they came, the patrols lifted into the sky and disappeared beyond the clouds. Silence returned. Jacob walked back slowly, breathing hard. When he opened the shed door, Lyra rushed into his arms, shaking. "They were here. They almost found me." Jacob put his hand on her shoulder. "They're gone. For now." She looked up at him, eyes wet with tears. "If they find me again, they'll take my brother too." I can still feel him. He's weak. He's afraid, Jacob frowned. "You said you can sense him." "How far?" "Many miles," she said, touching her chest. "North in the mountains. They keep the young ones there." Jacob leaned back, thinking. His old hover tractor wasn't made for long trips, but maybe it could handle the distance if he fixed the stabilizers. He looked at the girl again, tiny, fragile, and still trying to be brave. "You want to save him?" Jacob said quietly. "Then we do it together." Her eyes widened. "You'd come with me?" "Someone's got to keep you alive," he said with a small smile. "Besides, I never liked bullies." That night, Jacob worked in the barn fixing the tractor. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog. Lyra sat nearby, watching him in silence. The steady hum of tools and the smell of oil filled the air. For the first time in months, Jacob felt like he had a purpose again. But far off in the darkness, 2 glowing red eyes blinked from behind the trees. A small drone, watching, recording. Jacob didn't know it yet, but by saving one alien child, he had become part of something much larger than himself. A rebellion whispered in the stars. When he turned off the lamp and looked at the sleeping girl curled up in his coat, he made a silent promise. He would protect her, no matter what came next. And as dawn crept over the fields, the first rays of sunlight touched the farmer's land, a quiet farm that was no longer just his. It had become a battleground between mercy and fear, between the past and the future. Jacob Turner, the man who once cared only for his crops, now stood on the edge of a story that would one day shake worlds. The first rays of dawn touched the wet fields, turning the mist into gold. Jacob stood beside his old hover tractor, its engine sputtering and groaning like an animal that had forgotten how to run. He wiped the grease from his hands and looked at Lyra, who was sitting on a crate hugging her knees and staring at the morning sky. "All right," Jacob said, tightening the last bolt. "She's ready, probably." Lyra tilted her head, her big blue eyes filled with doubt. "Probably?" Jacob smirked. "She's old, but she's got spirit. Like me." The little alien smiled faintly. It was the first real smile he had seen from her since that night in the orchard. But behind that smile was fear. She kept glancing north, the direction of the mountains. Her brother was somewhere out there, trapped, weak, waiting. Jacob packed what little food he had left, a small canteen of water and a plasma cutter he used for repairing machinery. It wasn't much, but it was all he could carry. The moment he climbed onto the tractor, he felt the weight of his choice settle in his chest. This wasn't a farm errand. This was war. Lyra climbed beside him, wrapping herself in the blanket he had given her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Humans hate my kind. You could get killed." Jacob looked straight ahead, the morning light reflecting off his tired eyes. "Not all humans are the same. And if doing the right thing kills me, then maybe it's worth it." The engine roared to life, sending ripples through the puddles. The tractor lifted slightly off the ground, floating above the mud. As it started moving, the world around them changed. Fields turned into rocky hills, and familiar paths faded behind them. For a while, they didn't speak. The hum of the engine and the whistle of the wind were their only companions. Birds flew overhead, startled by the strange sight of a farmer and a tiny alien riding together. But then, as they passed a burned-out village, Lyra's small voice broke the silence. "This used to be my home." Jacob slowed the tractor. The place was nothing but ashes and twisted metal. The smell of old smoke still lingered. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "They came in the night," she whispered. "The soldiers. They said they were taking us for safety. But they took everyone. My parents tried to stop them. My mother, she didn't survive." Her voice trembled. "That's when my brother and I ran." Jacob looked at her, this little creature who had seen more horror than any child should. "No one should lose their family like that," he said. Lyra turned toward him. "Did you lose yours too?" Jacob stared at the road ahead. "Yeah, long time ago. The sickness took my wife and boy. After that, the farm was all I had." For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Only the wind answered. But somehow the silence felt different, like two broken lives quietly finding each other. As they climbed into the hills, the fog thickened. Strange glowing plants pulsed with blue light along the rocks, and the air smelled sharp, almost metallic. Jacob kept one hand on the steering rod, scanning the horizon. "How far?" he asked. "Close," Lyra said, touching her chest. "I can feel him. He's weak but alive." Jacob nodded. "Then we keep moving." Suddenly the tractor beeped. The engine's light flashed red. "Uh-oh," Jacob muttered. The vehicle began to shake. "Not now!" He pulled it to the side of the trail. The engine coughed and died, sinking to the ground. He jumped off, opened the panel, and found a burnt-out power core. "We're out of charge." Lyra stepped forward, her small hands glowing faintly. "I can help," Jacob blinked. "You can fix machines?" She nodded. "My people can share energy, if we have enough strength." She placed her hands on the core, her silver skin glowing brighter and brighter. The metal hummed, the air around her shimmering with light. Jacob watched in awe as the core flickered back to life. When she pulled away, her breathing was heavy. "It will last a few more hours," Jacob smiled. "Remind me never to underestimate you again." But before they could climb back on, a sharp sound echoed through the valley, a mechanical drone's hum. Jacob froze. "Down," he whispered. They ducked behind a rock just as a small patrol drone glided overhead, scanning the area with red beams. Lyra pressed close to him, holding her breath. The beam swept past them, pausing for a moment on the tractor. Jacob grabbed a handful of dirt and tossed it into the air near the drone's sensors. The dust scattered, confusing the signal. The drone spun, beeped an alarm, and then zipped away toward the horizon. Lyra exhaled shakily. That was close. Jacob wiped sweat from his forehead. Too close. They know we're moving north now. He looked at the mountains, their jagged peaks hidden by clouds. Somewhere up there was a camp holding a dying boy. And now every patrol in the region would be watching for them. He climbed back onto the tractor and held out a hand to her. Come on, kid. We don't stop now. Lyra took his hand and climbed up, her small frame shaking but her eyes fierce. For my brother, she said softly. For your brother, Jacob agreed. As the tractor rumbled back to life, the two unlikely companions rode into the mist. One human farmer with nothing left to lose, and one alien child with everything to fight for. And far above them, in a collector ship orbiting the planet, an officer watched their trail on a glowing screen. His cold voice echoed through the command room. Activate all ground units, he ordered. The fugitive is not alone anymore. The human must be captured alive. The chase had begun. The mountains rose like dark teeth against the dying sun. Wind howled through the narrow passes, carrying the smell of ash and metal. Jacob guided the old hover tractor up the rocky slope, its engine whining in protest. Lyra sat beside him, clutching the pendant she wore around her neck. Her brother's charm, the last thing he had given her before they were torn apart. We're close, she whispered. Her voice trembled not from cold but from something deeper, fear and hope tangled together. Jacob glanced at her. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the orange light of sunset. She looked so small sitting there. Yet there was something powerful about her silence, something that told him she wouldn't stop, not until her brother was safe. The tractor stopped near the edge of a cliff. Below them, hidden between the crags, stood the collector camp. Floodlights sliced through the mist and dark figures patrolled the fences. Strange metal cages lined the compound, filled with shapes that barely moved. Lyra's breath caught. He's down there, she said. I can feel him. Jacob looked down, his heart tightening. Then that's where we go. They spent an hour watching the guards, learning the pattern of their patrols. The fence pulsed with blue electricity. The only weak spot was near a drainage pipe that ran under the western wall. Jacob pointed at it. That's our way in. Lyra nodded, but her hands were shaking. If they see us, they won't, Jacob said. Not if we're careful. He pulled a piece of cloth from his pack and tore it in half, handing her one. Tie this over your mouth. Less heat for their scanners to pick up. She obeyed without question. Together they crawled down the rocky path, the ground cold under their palms. Every sound felt too loud. The crunch of gravel, the hiss of wind, the pounding of Jacob's heart. When they reached the drainage pipe, Jacob knelt to check the flow. It was narrow but passable. I'll go first, he said. The tunnel was damp and smelled of rust. Water dripped from the ceiling as they crawled forward in darkness, the faint hum of the camp growing louder. When they finally emerged, they were inside the perimeter. Lyra touched Jacob's sleeve and pointed. Across the yard, behind two guards, was a small cage. Inside, a boy, thin, pale, barely breathing. His silver skin was dull, his eyes half open. My brother, Lyra whispered, tears forming instantly. Jacob scanned the area. Two guards with rifles, one spotlight sweeping across every 10 seconds. We'll have to be quick, he murmured. He picked up a loose piece of metal from the ground and tossed it toward the far wall. The sound clanged loud in the quiet night. The guards turned, muttering in their strange tongue, and walked to investigate. Now, Jacob said. They sprinted toward the cage, crouching low. Lyra dropped beside her brother, pressing her glowing hands against the lock. The metal hissed and melted away under her touch. Taro, she whispered, wake up. Please wake up. The boy stirred weakly, his eyes fluttering open. Lyra? It's me, she said, her voice breaking. We're going home. Jacob lifted the boy in his arms. He was light, too light. We have to move, Jacob said. Now. But before they could reach the tunnel, a voice shouted behind them. Intruders! The sirens blared, red lights flashing through the camp. Guards poured out of the barracks, weapons raised. Jacob ducked behind a container, shielding the children. Plasma bolts scorched the ground around them. Go, he yelled. Get to the pipe. Lyra hesitated, looking at him. You'll die, Not if you run, Jacob shouted back. He picked up a fallen guard's blaster and fired blindly at the searchlights, shattering them. Darkness swallowed the camp. Lyra pulled her brother toward the tunnel, crying as explosions echoed behind them. Jacob fired again and again until the blaster overheated. A bolt hit the ground near his feet, throwing him off balance. Pain seared across his arm. Still, he didn't stop. When he saw Lyra's head disappear into the tunnel, he smiled through the pain. "Good girl," he whispered. He ran after them, sliding into the pipe just as the camp erupted in flames. The shockwave chased them through the tunnel, heat licking at their backs. When they burst out the other side, Jacob collapsed on the cold ground, coughing. Lyra fell beside him, holding her brother close. "You're hurt," she cried. Jacob looked at the burn on his arm, smoke still rising from his sleeve. "I've had worse," he said, trying to laugh but ending in a wince. Taro reached out weakly, touching Jacob's face. "Human helped?" Jacob nodded. "Yeah, kid. Humans aren't all bad." The boy smiled faintly before passing out. Lyra's tears fell freely now. "You saved him. You saved us." Jacob sat up slowly, looking back at the burning camp in the distance. "No," he said softly. "You saved me." In the orange glow of the fire, the three of them huddled together, an old farmer, a small alien girl, and her broken brother. Above them, the stars burned brighter than ever, silent witnesses to their escape. For the first time in years, Jacob felt something he thought he had lost forever: hope. But far above, in orbit, the collector commander watched the flames through a monitor. His eyes narrowed. "The human interferes," he said coldly. "Send the hunters. Bring them back alive." The war for one small family had just become a war for something greater, something the universe had forgotten. Compassion, humanity, and Jacob Turner was now the most wanted man on the planet. The sun rose over the mountains like a tired ember, casting pale light over the valley below. Smoke from the destroyed collector camp drifted upward in thin black ribbons. The air was quiet, too quiet. Jacob sat against a rock, his arm wrapped in bandages Lyra had made from her torn blanket. The burn still hurt, but he didn't care. He watched the two alien children huddled together by the small campfire. Lyra fed her brother tiny pieces of bread, whispering soft words in her strange language. The boy's breathing was slow but steady. "You're tougher than you look," Jacob said quietly. Lyra looked up at him, her big blue eyes full of gratitude and worry. "He'll live," she said. "Because of you," Jacob shook his head. "Because of you. You didn't give up." A weak smile touched her lips. "You humans, you always say brave things when you're afraid." Jacob chuckled. "Yeah, maybe we do." But deep down he wasn't laughing. He knew they weren't safe. The camp's explosion would bring more patrols. They had hours, maybe less, before the sky filled with search drones. He stood and looked toward the horizon. The land beyond the ridge was open desert, no cover, no shelter. His only chance was the old mining tunnels that ran through the hills, abandoned since the war. He had passed them once while trading supplies years ago. If they could reach them, maybe they could disappear for a while. He turned back to Lyra. "Pack whatever's left. We move at sunrise." She frowned. "You're hurt. I'll live," he said. "I've had worse milking cows." Lyra tilted her head. "What's a cow?" Jacob smiled faintly. "Big animal. Gives milk. Smells bad." Her soft laughter echoed in the quiet morning, fragile and beautiful. For a moment Jacob forgot the danger, but when a faint hum trembled through the ground, his heart froze. He knew that sound. "Drones," he whispered. Lyra's eyes widened. "They found us." Jacob grabbed his pack and motioned for them to move. "Go, into the rocks." They ran through the narrow paths, the children's bare feet kicking up dust. Above, 3 silver drones swept over the cliffs, red lights scanning every shadow. Jacob led them toward a cluster of boulders where the mountain split in two. "Down here," he said, pulling away loose stones to reveal a small crevice. "Go inside!" Lyra pushed her brother in first, then crawled after him. Jacob followed last, pressing his back to the wall just as a beam of light flashed across the rocks where they had stood moments ago. The drones paused, scanning. One tilted downward, its sensor locking on faint heat trails. Jacob held his breath. His muscles screamed to move, but he stayed perfectly still. Lyra's hand trembled in the dark, gripping his sleeve. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then suddenly a loud boom echoed from the valley below, an explosion from the camp's reactor collapsing. The drones turned and shot off toward the noise. Jacob exhaled slowly. That was close, he whispered. They crawled deeper into the narrow passage. The air grew colder, the light dimmer. Finally, they emerged into a wide cavern. Old mining carts and rusted tools lay scattered across the ground. This will do, Jacob said, dropping his pack. We'll rest here for a while. Lyra set her brother down gently, covering him with the blanket. She touched his forehead and her skin glowed faintly, passing warmth into him. The boy sighed in his sleep. Jacob watched in quiet awe. That power of yours, it's something. She looked at him. My mother used to say it's not power, it's life. We can give part of our energy to heal others, but only if we mean it. Jacob nodded slowly. Guess that's something humans could learn. For a long time, they sat in silence. Dust drifted from the ceiling like snow. Jacob leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. But even in rest, his mind raced. He had gone from a forgotten farmer to a hunted man in less than 2 days, and yet he didn't regret it, because for the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. Suddenly, Lyra whispered, Jacob, someone's coming. He opened his eyes. A faint light flickered near the tunnel entrance. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. Jacob grabbed the plasma cutter and crouched low. The glow grew brighter until a tall silhouette appeared in the doorway, a figure in a long coat, face hidden by a helmet. Easy, human, the stranger said in a calm voice. I'm not your enemy, Jacob frowned. That's what enemies usually say. The figure stepped forward, raising empty hands. Name's Arlen. I'm with the Resistance. He turned slightly, showing a patch on his sleeve. 2 stars crossed by a single flame. We've been watching the collectors too. Word travels fast. You did something impossible last night. Lyra stepped beside Jacob, her eyes wary. The Resistance? Humans don't fight for us. Arlen looked at her, his voice steady. Some of us do. Jacob lowered the cutter a little. If you're real, prove it. What do you want? Arlen's helmet retracted, revealing a scarred but determined face. I want to help you disappear before the hunters arrive, and then I want your help to start something bigger. Bigger? Jacob asked. The man smiled faintly. Hope. Behind them, Lyra's brother stirred, opening his eyes weakly. He whispered something in his language, and Lyra's face filled with emotion. Jacob looked at Arlen, then at the children, then at the faint light creeping through the tunnel cracks. The world was changing around him, and somehow he was right in the middle of it. All right, Jacob said finally. Show us the way. And with that, the farmer who once lived for his crops stood, ready to walk into a fight that would decide the fate of 2 worlds. The mountain wind howled through the broken tunnels as the world beyond burned. Dust swirled around the small group hiding in the cavern. The human farmer, the 2 alien children, and Arlen, the scarred man from the Resistance. Jacob stood near the entrance, gripping the plasma cutter like a weapon. His arm still ached, his body exhausted, but his eyes were sharp, alive. He had faced fear before, famine, loss, loneliness, but nothing like this. Now the fate of 2 children and maybe something far greater rested on his shoulders. Arlen was setting up a small communication beacon, its light flickering in the dark. They'll come soon, he said. The hunters don't leave survivors. We need to move before nightfall. Lyra's brother, Taro, was awake now, leaning weakly against the wall. His silver skin shimmered in the dim light. We can't keep running, he said in a faint voice. They will find us wherever we go. Lyra grabbed his hand, shaking her head. Don't say that. We're safe with Jacob. Jacob turned to her, his voice low but steady. He's right. We can't outrun ships that move faster than light. We need something they don't expect. Arlen looked at him. And what's that? Jacob smiled faintly. A human farmer with nothing to lose. Arlen raised an eyebrow. You've got guts, Turner. I'll give you that. Lyra stepped closer. There's another way, she said softly. My mother taught me something before she was taken. Our people have one last gift. A pulse that can disable any machine for a few minutes. But it drains everything, life, energy. Jacob's heart skipped. You mean it could kill you? She nodded. If it means saving Taro, it's worth it. No, Jacob said sharply. We're not doing that. You hear me? You've already lost too much. She looked up at him, her eyes glowing with quiet defiance. So have you. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with understanding. Outside, thunder cracked, a storm was forming. Or maybe it wasn't thunder at all. Arlen's beacon flashed red. Incoming signatures. They've found us. Jacob grabbed his jacket and motioned toward the back tunnels. Get the kids out of here. I'll buy you time. Lyra's voice trembled. You can't fight them alone. Jacob gave her a small smile. I've been alone most of my life, kid. I know how to make it count. But before he could move, Arlen caught his shoulder. You're brave, farmer, but you don't have to die to prove it. He handed Jacob a small device, an old detonator. Plant this by the entrance. When they come through, light it up. We'll be gone by then. Jacob nodded. Let's make it count. They worked quickly. Arlen led the children through the narrow tunnels toward an escape shaft that opened into the forest beyond. Jacob stayed behind, crouched by the cavern entrance. He could already hear the faint hum of engines outside. The hunters had arrived. Their boots hit the ground like thunder. Metallic voices echoed through the mountains. Target located, terminate. Jacob waited in silence, his finger hovering over the detonator. The first hunter appeared, a tall armored figure with glowing eyes and a rifle longer than Jacob's arm. Behind it came two more. He whispered to himself, for them. He pressed the button. The explosion shook the mountain. Fire and rock burst outward, swallowing the entrance in a wave of light. Jacob was thrown backward, the heat searing his skin. For a moment, everything went white. When he opened his eyes, the air was thick with dust and smoke. The tunnel ceiling had partially collapsed, sealing the way behind him. He could barely breathe, but he was alive. He coughed and tried to stand, gripping the wall for balance. Then he saw her, Lyra, running back toward him through the smoke. Lyra, he shouted hoarsely. You shouldn't be here! She ignored him, tears streaking down her face. You saved us once, she said, voice breaking. Now it's my turn. Her hands began to glow. Brighter than ever before, the light spreading up her arms like fire. Jacob realized what she was doing. No, don't, but it was too late. The light burst from her body in a wave that filled the cavern, humming like 1,000 voices singing in pain and peace at once. The air shimmered, the rocks trembled, and outside every collector machine suddenly froze. Engines died. Drones crashed from the sky. The hunter's armor flickered and went dark. The entire valley fell silent. When the light faded, Jacob found her lying on the ground, barely breathing. He rushed to her side, holding her small hand. Lyra, hey, stay with me. You did it. You're safe now. Her eyes fluttered open. Did we win? Jacob swallowed hard. Yeah, kid. You did it, she smiled faintly. Then I can rest. Her hand went still in his. Jacob sat there in the ashes, holding her close as the world went quiet again. Moments later, Arlen and Taro appeared, their faces pale. Taro fell to his knees beside his sister, tears shining on his cheeks. She saved us all. Arlen placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. Her pulse reached beyond this valley. Every collector ship within 100 miles is down. You just gave the resistance a chance to fight back. Jacob didn't speak. He just stared at the horizon where the smoke met the sunrise. Weeks later, when the story spread through the colonies, people spoke of the human farmer who defied the collectors and the little alien girl who lit the sky. Her name became a symbol, a word whispered by both humans and aliens alike. Lyra, the light that broke the chains. Jacob rebuilt his farm years later, but it was never the same. The fields grew green again, but one apple tree stood taller than the rest. Beneath it, a small stone glowed faintly with silver light. He visited it every morning, placing a fresh apple there. He would whisper softly, You didn't steal it this time, kid. You earned it, and somewhere among the stars, the promise they made to protect, to fight, to never give up, became the heartbeat of a new world. The story of the farmer and the tiny alien thief was no longer a tale of loss. It was the beginning of peace.